Fate Night Horrors. Stories that come for you at the hour you least expect. This one isn't just a story. Not entirely. I want you to picture a house, ordinary by most standards. A two-story with a basement and a half-finished attic. Settled in a quiet neighborhood. Front steps, a porch, the hum of life outside, and a yard. Trees that bent with the wind, windows that caught the morning sun. But even as a kid, I always knew something about that house wasn't ordinary. The attic, for one. It wasn't just a space at the top of the stairs. It carried weight, expectation, a smell of old wood, dust, and something waiting. You could feel it from the hallway. The stairs leading up there would creak differently under your feet, as if each step remembered every person who had ever climbed them. I never wanted to go up there, but I always did. Because whatever it was there, and I knew it. Years passed, I grew older, the attic never changed. Always the same smell, always the same stillness, always the sense that something lived above the ceiling beams, that it could see you, watch you. Sometimes it did. I would catch glimpses of it in the corner of my eye, a small shape, smiling, still. You could feel its attention like a pressure in the air. Even as a kid, I realized it was waiting, not for anyone else, for me. It wasn't malicious exactly, not toward me, but it was curious, hungry, testing, learning, and I, somehow, learned to confront it. Every time, never afraid, never flinching, because very early I realized that fear gave it power. Remove the fear and it could frustrate itself against the stillness, but it could never truly touch you. Not yet, anyway. The house itself seemed to bend around it. Small details changed when I dreamed it, or when I passed near the attic in waking memory. A tree fallen in the yard, a steeple caved in, a half-finished attic room, places that shouldn't exist, but did, every time. The entity shaped the house like clay. When I dreamed it, it often took a form, a child, black hair, pale face, too knowing, smiling, waiting. Sometimes it became a teenager. Sometimes it reflected someone I recognized, almost like a mirror of me at 15. Always I could see through it. Always I knew it wasn't another person. And always I went up there. Because I had to. Because it waited. Because I was the only one who ever did. I've dreamed about this house for as long as I can remember. Not just any house. The one on Brady Street. Even as a child, I knew it was different. Something about it. Heavier. Older than its years. Waiting. The street itself was quiet. The house sat at the end. Squat, familiar, yet impossibly wrong whenever I dreamed it. In my dreams, the attic tower existed. A crooked steeple jutting from the roof, splintered and collapsed, as though a tree had fallen on it long ago. It was caved in, rotted, ruined. Yet in waking life, no such tower existed. Inside, the air always felt thick. The floors groaned under my feet. The hallways were the same as I remembered as a child. My bedroom door down the hall from the attic door, yet the rooms sometimes shifted. A bathroom different than reality. Furniture that didn't belong to my family. People seated on couches I couldn't fully see. Silent, waiting, watching. And always the attic door. Solid, real, not a trap door, not a panel in the ceiling. Just a bedroom door, hinged, knob intact, leading to the staircase I had memorized. First to turn to the left, and then another left, then upward into darkness. Something lived up there. Something that wanted me. But I wasn't afraid. Even as a child, even when it killed someone in front of me, I was never afraid. I confronted it every time. Every time it tried to take someone else to get to me. Every time I stood my ground. In the attic it took many forms. Usually a child, pale, black hair, eyes that held death. Sometimes it shifted. A teenager, maybe a version of me at 15, or someone else entirely. But I could always tell, I could always see through it, and I always knew it. and every time I reached the tower steps, halfway up, caved in and broken, I felt it waiting, watching, smiling, always patient, always waiting. Even when new people appeared in my dreams, strangers or old neighbors, it always focused on me. They were never safe. It killed them, and I always knew it was doing it, even when I couldn't see it. Even now, decades later, when I return to the house in my dreams, I climb those steps, I confront it. I remember everything. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway, every piece of furniture misplaced in impossible ways. And I know it remembers me too. The attic door loomed ahead, solid, real, not a trap door, not a panel on the ceiling, just a bedroom door. My hand hovered over it for a moment, because I knew, I always knew, and it knew I knew. Before I even touched the wood, the entity appeared at the edge of my vision. A small boy this time, pale, black hair, eyes like empty sockets full of intent. It grinned at me, not a mischievous grin, a hungry grin. "It's been a while," it whispered. I didn't flinch. "You remember me," it said, its voice sliding along the walls, like smoke curling through the hallways. "Of course I do," I muttered, annoyed. The entity tilted its head, its grin widened impossibly. "You never get scared," it said, almost disappointed. "Not anymore. Not like before." Boring. I rolled my eyes and pulled the door open. The staircase yawned before me. First it turned to the left, then another left, just like I had always memorized. No right turns, no shortcuts, just the route I had known since childhood, the route that led to it. It followed, always watching. It leapt, then froze midair as if mocking gravity itself. It shifted, a teenager now, pale, smirking, like me at 15. "You think you're ready?" it hissed. I didn't answer. I never did. I just started up the stairs. Every creak of the wood was amplified by its attention. The boards groaned under my weight. Shadows flickered along the walls. Voices whispered from behind me, too quick to understand. Taunts of something that had been practicing patience for decades. "You're slow," it said. "Why take the long way? You could just stop." I kept walking. It shifted again. A small, almost childlike version now, hopping from step to step ahead of me, circling, laughing. "I like you like this," it said. "You used to be afraid. Not anymore. Not scared. Just irritated." I exhaled. "Good for you," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the narrow stairwell. The entity blinked, like it didn't know whether to be insulted or amused. Then it disappeared, only to reappear halfway up the steps, crouched on the broken, collapsed section of the steps. Its grin stretched wide across a pale, impossibly thin face. "You always come up here," it said. "You always confront me. No one else will. No one else can. And yet, you think you're in charge?" I ignored it. Every time it tried to scare me, every shift in form, every whisper, I felt the same certainty. Annoyance, not fear. And that certainty made it pause, made it hesitate. It was forced to perform, test, try harder, because I refused to give it the reaction it craved. The stairs narrowed at the top, the last turn leading into the attic itself, collapsed beams, broken wood, splintered boards, unfinished drywall hanging from the rafters. It landed in front of me in a blink, grinning again, morphing between a child and a teenager, a familiar figure. "Do you know why I wait?" it asked. "Do you know why I always wait?" I stepped around it steadily. "You're bored," I said. "You want attention. You want someone to care." It hissed, voice sliding into frustration. "You do care," it said. "You always care." It waited, patient, grinning, and I stared back, annoyed. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on splintered wood. The attic shifted slightly under my weight. The air thickened, carrying a metallic tang I couldn't place. The entity didn't move at first, just watched, testing. Its grin stretched wider than it should have, impossibly thin, like it was feeling for my reaction. Then it lunged, not at me, not directly, but across the ruined floor, landing atop a half-collapsed beam. Its form rippled. Child, teen, my 15-year-old reflection, shifting fast, a blur of movement. "You know what it's like," it whispered, voice low and curling along the rafters, "to wait for years, to know the world above will forget you." I didn't answer. I kept stepping, carefully, deliberate. The attic opened slightly ahead, a small platform of intact floor, jagged around the edges. And there they were, 3 figures, seated, silent, waiting, watching. Eyes not human, reflecting decades of expectation, terror, and something older. The entity lunged again, closer this time, grinning, shifting, child, teen, familiar, giggling eerily. I swung, not fear, not hesitation, a sharp instinctive punch that landed squarely on its face. The punch connected with a sickening wet snap, though it felt more like a pressure than pain, as if hitting air and substance at once. My knuckles scraped along the surface, both solid and unearthly. The entity recoiled instantly, a jolt that made the broken floorboards tremble under my feet. Its body rippled violently, faces shifting, child, teen, familiar, but the grin wavered, stretched as if the force of my blow had punched a hole through its control. Its head jerked back, eyes narrowing, smoke curling from the edges of its mouth. "You," it hissed, voice like wind scraping against metal. Then the words fractured into sharp, broken syllables. It recoiled again, flickering, unstable, almost transparent in some places, as though the punch had split its form across dimensions. I felt the attic retract. Dust puffed in clouds, stirred by the tremor. The metallic tang in the air thickened, biting at my throat. The half-collapsed beams groaned as if straining under invisible weight, and the drywall hanging from the rafters twitched violently. Then my attention snapped to the leftmost figure, the one I had always known would die first. Its head twisted slowly toward me, eyes flickering like dying embers. And then, the entity's influence became unmistakable. A thin, hissing pulse seemed to radiate from it, or maybe from the entity itself. It was impossible to separate the two. The leftmost figure trembled, shuddering violently as though the air around it had been drained. A dry, cracking sound echoed through the attic, like brittle bone splintering in slow motion. I watched, frozen for a heartbeat, as the figure collapsed inward, folding in on itself like wet paper. Dust and motes swirled around its collapsing body. I could almost feel the cold emptiness of the space it left behind, the hollow pool where life had been withdrawn. The entity, hovering nearby, made a low guttural hiss, a sound like wind, a sound that rattled through my ears. It seemed pleased, almost reverent in its satisfaction. "See?" it whispered, the voice curling around the rafters. "They never survive. And you always think it's different with you." I exhaled slowly, not fear, not panic, annoyance. Always annoyance. The entity froze for a fraction of a second, the grin wavering. My punch had done something. It had forced a pause, a crack in its patient, endless facade. I stepped forward onto the platform, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. My hand brushed a splintered support, feeling the faint hum of energy, like a heartbeat frozen in wood. The entity shifted, muttered, rippled across the attic, shapes and half-words bouncing off the walls, a chaotic test of its presence in mine. "Do you see it now?" it hissed, voice sliding along the rafters like smoke. "Do you see why I wait?" I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, its body stretched impossibly tall, then shrank back, collapsing into the pale small boy again. The air moved then, a sudden current that hadn't been there before, not heavy and stagnant, but sharp and alive. Dust swirled around the entity's feet, the tiny particles catching in the pale light. The metallic tang sharpened, prickling at my senses. The entity recoiled, its eyes narrowing in confusion. Maybe fear, a reaction I had never seen before. "You feel it?" it hissed, voice strained. "You feel it?" "Yes," I said, calm and deliberate. "I can, and it doesn't scare me." The entity froze for a heartbeat, maybe two. It seemed unsure, and in that pause I realized something fundamental about it, about the way I had waited all these years. It wasn't the house that held the power. It wasn't even the figures that sat waiting. It was the expectation, the test. And for decades I had never given it what it wanted. Not fear, not surrender, not flinching. The shadows deepened, reacting to the tension between us. Dust rolled in motes, curling like smoke, and the leftmost figure still collapsed, left a hollow weight in the attic, a space the entity had claimed and reshaped. Then the entity hissed again, a sharp sound scraping the air, louder, closer, pressing against my ears. "Then you will play my game," it said, and the attic itself seemed to tense, the remaining two figures on their chairs twitching, shifting, as if aware of the blow I had delivered. I stepped toward the central figure, boots thudding on the splintered wood. The entity mirrored my movement, small, large, child, teen, reflection, circling, testing the space, testing me. The platform beneath my feet groaned under my weight. The dust stirred, brushing against my skin, the air thick, carrying the metallic tang, the smell of old wood, and something older, something alive. I stopped just short of the figure. Its head turned slowly toward me, its eyes wide and unblinking, reflecting centuries of waiting. The entity hovered closer, a pulse of energy coiling around its form, testing my resolve. And I stood there, ready, unafraid, waiting for what it would do next. The central figure stirred, its edges flickered, thin and insubstantial, but the eyes, those impossible glowing eyes, locked onto mine. I could feel the attic tightening around me, the air vibrating with anticipation. Every splintered floorboard beneath my boots pressed a weight into my feet, and dust motes spun in the currents like sparks in a dim forge. The entity shifted beside the central figure, pulsing like smoke through solid form. Its voice whispered nearly inside my skull, "You think that hurt? You think you can strike at me and not pay?" I could feel the heat of its focus, a pressure on my chest and shoulders, like it was trying to push me back with pure intent. The smell of iron and ozone sharpened, metallic and biting. My knuckles still tingled from the punch, a dull thrum, but I didn't retreat. I had never retreated. The figure leaned forward, almost human in its motions now, though it was stretched, fragile, its form quivering with anticipation of collapse. The entity's hand, or what could have been a hand, snaked toward the figure, passing through it, and a shudder ran down the attic like a tremor. The figure twitched violently, like wind through a loose sail, then a low cracking sound echoed through the space. The entity hissed, sharp and satisfied, as the central figure shuddered but held its place. The entity's attention snapped back to me. Its grin flickered, wider than humanly possible, stretching across pale, thin features that rippled like liquid. It lunged forward, faster than the eye could track, an erratic blur of small boy, teenager, reflection of me. I felt the air shift violently as it passed, tugging at my clothes, hair, even the dust at my feet, whipping into clouds around my boots. I braced. This wasn't a strike to be feared. It was a test. I felt the wind of it brush against my chest, like a hand made of cold, biting smoke. My body tensed, muscles coiled. I swung again, not hesitating, not aiming for reaction, aiming for reality. The impact landed differently this time, more sensation, like hitting a dense fog, but it trembled under the pressure. A shock vibrated up my arm and deep into my shoulder, as if the punch met a resistance, both real and unreal, neither flesh nor nothing. The entity recoiled violently, staggering back as if pushed by the weight of my intent. Its faces flickered, child, teen, familiar, all at once overlaying each other like broken reflections in water. Its voice fractured, a high hiss, a low growl, static noise that vibrated against the beams. Impossible. How? It growled, faltering mid-word, unsure, unpracticed. The attic reacted with it, dust swirling in roiling spirals, motes catching in slivers of light. The collapsed beams trembled as though sentient, and the leftmost figure, though still folded inward, seemed to draw a faint breath from the shadows of its empty shell, the hollow air twisting and pulsing with the entity's frustration. I stepped closer to the central figure, feeling the rough grain of the floorboards under my feet, the cool bite of the attic air in my face, the subtle hum of the building itself in response to my presence. My knuckles ached faintly from the blows, but it was nothing. My hand hovered near the figure now, cautious, measured, feeling the energy of the space, the pulse of intent radiating from the entity. The faint heat of its focus like a physical thing pressing against my skin. The entity's body coiled, rippling faster than I could track. It hissed and spat words that seemed to fracture reality itself. You never obey. You never flinch. You will pay. I ignored the threat. I didn't flinch. I didn't move backward. The attic held its breath with me. The figures on their chairs, the ruined beams, the collapsing drywall, all waited, and for the first time I felt the entity hesitate. A crack appeared in its grin, a tiny, imperceptible shift, but enough to know that the test had changed. Then my action, the punch, the refusal, the unwavering step forward had broken something I had counted on for decades. The air vibrated with tension, the smell of iron and dust thickening around us. My boots pressed against the uneven floor, grounding me, anchoring me. The central figure twitched slightly under the entity's influence, but it did not collapse. Its eyes remained fixed on mine, unblinking, reflecting an eternity of waiting, and now, perhaps, a new question. Could it survive? The entity recoiled, then lingered, watching, whispering half-words almost to itself. You feel it. You feel it. And yet you stand. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My body, my breath, the rhythm of my steps, all of it said more than words ever could. And in that pause, the attic seemed to settle slightly, the shadows shifting but not swallowing, the platform beneath my feet holding firm despite the ruin around it. The test was not over. The tower had more to show, but for a moment, a fraction of a moment, the entity had lost control. The central figure shuddered, edges vibrating violently. Its head jerked, twisted, and then a high, keening wail erupted from it, thin, ragged, and agonized, echoing off the low attic beams. The sound scraped at the wood, reverberating along the walls, a raw, living thing that made the dust tremble in the air. I could feel it through my bones, a tremor rising from the floorboards, through the soles of my boots and into my chest. The entity hovered closer, its form rippling erratically, child, teen, familiar, its grin stretching, narrowing, morphing with every pulse of sound from the figure. It hissed, low and guttural. Yes, yes, scream. Let it burn. Let it dissolve. The central figure's body began to distort, twisting like wax held too close to flame. Its features ran and melted, slipping along the contours of its frame as if gravity had no hold. The edges of its form liquefied, dripping downward in slow, glistening strands, pulling into the shadows beneath it. I could see the faint glow of its energy flickering through the melting flesh, flickers like sparks through translucent candle wax. The rightmost figure stirred next, shivering, shifting, but then, impossibly, it began to unravel in silence. Its form wavered, thinned, and then vanished entirely, leaving only the faintest shimmer where it had sat. The central figurehead almost completely dissolved, its keening wails tapering into a wet, dragging hiss. Its form melted down the warped floorboards and glistening rivulets, slipping along jagged edges like wax from a candle burned too close to flame. I could feel the vibrations of its collapse underfoot, a faint quivering that ran up through the soles of my boots and into my spine. The rightmost figurehead evaporated, a silent, ghostly shimmer where I had sat. A hollow absence that made the shadows stretch longer, colder. The leftmost figure remained a collapsed heap, an empty, hollow weight marking the void the entity had carved. The pale boy hovered closer, its grin impossibly stretched, the eyes narrowing like burning coals in the dim light. It circled the remnants, shifting, child, teen, familiar, its form pulsating, unstable, like smoke caught in a draft. All gone, and yet you come, it hissed, words curling around the beams and broken floorboards. Its voice was a low vibration, scraping along the wood, the rafters, brushing my ears with sharp, metallic pressure. Then I saw it, the staircase, rising where the chairs had been, spiraling into the impossible tower, its broken steps jutting upward at angles that made my stomach lurch. The wood twisted, half-rotted, and splintered, each plank threatening to crumble under weight. Handrails splintered into jagged teeth, dust swirling around the gaps, stirred by a draft that seemed alive, whispering with the sigh of a building breathing centuries of anticipation. I stepped forward. My boots crunched along the jagged platform. My fingers brushed the first step. It shifted under my touch, a quiver like the spine of a living thing. I placed my foot on it. The wood groaned, twisted, another step. A dry, splintering crack shot through my toes, scraping along the soles of my boots. The staircase would not hold. Each movement felt like pressing against impossibility itself. The entity hovered near, voice tightening into a hiss, almost reverent, almost furious. You always reach, but you never touch, never ascend, never win. Its body rippled violently, morphing between every form I'd seen it take, shaking the very air with its presence, testing me, taunting me. Its grin twitched with irritation, narrowing, stretching impossibly. I looked up at the tower. The crooked, leaning spiral loomed into the darkness. Every step was fractured, warped, half missing. The jagged edges caught the pale light in cruel angles. No matter how determined, I could not climb. No matter how fast, how deliberate, how calm, this tower would not allow passage. The steps were broken, collapsed, impassable. The attic seemed to inhale, the dust swirling into fine columns, coiling like smoke around the fractured staircase. The metallic tang thickened, clawing at the back of my throat, filling my sinuses with sharp, biting air. The entity circled me once, low to the floor now, almost crouching. Its gaze flicked to each of my movements. The grin wavered, faltering, but never vanished entirely. Then in a pulse of sudden awareness, the attic itself reacted. The beams groaned and shivered as if the building had learned to breathe. The broken floorboards beneath my boots flexed, trembled. The empty space left by the dissolved figures seemed to hum, a void stretching from floor to rafters, and from that void the staircase pressed upward, a cruel mockery of ascent, impossible, beckoning, but unreachable. The entity hissed again, louder, closer, pressing against my ears, vibrating the air. Then, you will play my game, it spat, voice like wind scraping against stone. I stood, boots planted, chest tight, aware of every splinter beneath my feet, every shiver of dust along my skin. It was testing me, prodding the edges of my resolve, forcing me to measure my patience against the impossible. I reached forward, hand brushing along the warped banister. Nothing held. Every plank twisted beneath my fingers. My fingertips caught on splinters, scraping the grain, the faint hum of energy beneath them buzzing like an electric current. The entity's gaze followed, unblinking, narrowing to slits, its voice a whisper and hiss all at once. You feel it, don't you? Yes, I said, steady. I feel it, and it doesn't scare me. It froze, a twitch of its grin. Its shape flickered, uncertain, as if my defiance had punched a hole in its patient design. For the first time, the entity paused. Not in control, not omnipotent. It hovered over the fractured staircase, circling the empty air where the figures had been, and I knew the tower was impossible. The stairs could not be climbed. It was meant to end here. I looked up one last time. The crooked spire loomed, jagged and collapsing, a stairway that promised ascent, but offered only futility. I could feel the pulse of the attic in my bones, the metallic tang sharp in my throat, dust scratching at my skin like cold ash. The entity hovered, silent, grin, taunt, testing me, frustrated, reverent. And I understood. There was no further step. No path forward. The dream had held its challenge. The tower had waited, and I had reached the end. I woke. The air in my lungs were sharp, the metallic tang lingering faintly at the back of my throat. The tower, the entity, the figures, all collapsed behind my eyelids. My chest heaved. My feet pressed against the floor of my room, not the attic. But the memory remained. The impossible staircase, broken and unreachable. The entity hovering, the dissolved figures, the hollowed weight of what had been claimed and taken. And yet, the tower at Brady Street existed, and I had faced it. And yet, it still had not yielded. What's up, everybody? This is the host of the Fate Night Horrors channel. Just popping in to say thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening. Follow, share, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night, folks.